26 is a cosine function. So right away, I'm starting to think about the graph. And I'm thinking cosine functions. One of them yesterday started in the middle of the graph and went up and down and up and down and up and down. One of them started at the top and went down and up and down and up and down and up and down. Which one's cosine? Down and up one. So it starts at the very top of my graph. I'm looking at this function and I'm looking for numbers. The first number I come across is a 2. What is this 2 right here doing to the graph? It's the period. And for the period, I'm supposed to do a little equation to figure out what the period actually is. Okay, 2 pi over b. So if I take 2 pi over 2, I get pi. That means that if this graph were to start at 0, it would finish its down and up by the time I hit pi. My suggestion to you yesterday was to use a period as 4 of your boxes to set your scale, because that would mean that you need to be at the top again when you get above the pi, which would mean this would be half of that. Perfect. Half of pi, or pi over 2. Before I can start my graph, though, I need to think about the other numbers involved. What is the amplitude of this graph? Where do you see that? Okay. Got this imaginary guy here. So that means I'm going to set up the maximum and minimum of my graph as 1 and -1. Except, I like to, at this point, also think about the vertical shifting. They should be at 1 and -1. Where does the vertical shifting come in, though, with my equation? So this guy here tells me it does what? So that means that both of these dotted lines I just drew, they're actually 2 lower than I drew them originally. I like to do that now. Some people do it later. Some people put in their little ghost points now and then shift them all down when they shift them left and right. I like to do it right away. So I'm going to take these dotted lines and I'm going to shift them downward too, which means this one, this minimum, if it's right now at -1, it actually should be down at a minimum of -3. I have to make this line a little longer. So he's going to shift down to -3. This is the minimum of my graph. My maximum needs to shift down 2 units, 1, 2. It went from 1 to -1. So this is the maximum of the graph. You don't see that midline originally because it used to be that axis. If it helps you to draw it in to make your graph symmetric, then go ahead and draw it. Some people kind of visualize it, but that is called the midline, and that should be where the center of my graph is in terms of its vertical movement. So I have used the number at the very beginning. I used the number before the x, and I used the number at the very end. The only number I didn't use was what was added or subtracted to the x in the parentheses. Are we okay so far? Are there questions on any of these? I'm going to start my graph. You guys told me at the top. And I need to finish at the top again, ready to repeat my pattern when I hit pi. If all this one does is go down and then up, then that means halfway there it should be at the bottom, which means halfway to halfway, and halfway to the end, I would be there and there. And I'd be ready to sketch my graph. Except, not. What is the last type of shifting that happens in this graph here? If I were to, which direction? Right or left? Yes. The plus sign means it's going to go left pi over 2. So this is where I had you guys use a colored pencil yesterday. Some of you might just lightly do your points and then move them. If it helps you to use a colored pencil, feel free to grab a colored pencil, or some people switch to a pen at this point. You got it all set up. You shouldn't go wrong from this. Now I'm supposed to go left pi over 2. So my job would be to think about the boxes and the scale I'm using. How much is one box worth on your graph right now? Left and right. A quarter. Good. Yeah. Pi over 4, a quarter. So if I need to shift them pi over 2, how many boxes will I have to move? 2. So I'm going to take every one of these points, and I'm going to actually move them 2 boxes to the left. So this guy here is going to shift over here. Oh, that's so cool. I can actually just move mine. If I couldn't, and I was on paper, I might just do it in a color, or maybe I'd erase this or have done it lightly, because this guy would now move over here. This dude's over here. This dude's over here. This guy here would come back to here. This guy would come back to the first one. And this guy here would come over here. And so my graph would look something like this. When you graph it, try not to make it look like a V. It's tempting to when you only have 5 points. But you got to remember the bigger picture is that this graph continues forever and ever and ever. Some people like to actually then draw in more points once they see the pattern to help them get that curve. But I want to see at least one full cycle, which is what we just drew. How are we coming on these problems? Did you get a chance to try it? You just haven't tried them yet, or are you struggling with parts of them? Does anyone have one that they know that they're struggling with, that they want us to look at what they've done so far? Nobody has any thoughts that they're willing to share? Anybody got them all done? They're asking you in this directions to graph it and to show everything between 0 and 2 pi when you get it done. So this graph, the way that we spaced it, right now I can actually only see, once I moved it, I can see from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2 on my graph. Like that's where my blue is drawn. So what the directions is asking you to do is to continue, and if you've decided that pi is the end of this, to actually continue going all the way to 2 pi and to figure out what this graph would look like from here all the way down to here. So to keep following a repetition of the pattern, like if I'm up here, for example, then I know at the next tick mark I would be down here. At the next tick mark I'd be down here. I'd be traveling back up. I would hit the top. I would travel back down. And I would actually end up at the bottom when I hit 2 pi. So my graph would continue this pattern. And so what they're asking in the directions is to keep showing more cycles until you hit 2 pi. For the sake of what we're doing, I'm only requiring you to show me 1 cycle, and if it's just the cycle moved over, cool. But if you do continue it, that's fine too. That's what they were actually looking for. So according to the directions, you wouldn't even have to have this piece. But I like having that piece because it came from my shifting, so it helps me know what it looked like. Good. Other questions?